Everybody, welcome back. It is the In My Grow Show, the podcast dedicated to taking the mystery out of cannabis. As always, I am your host, Alex Robles. Now and again, thank all the musicians who allow me to use their music throughout the podcast. I appreciate that very much. And I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to me have conversations about cannabis, even if sometimes it's just a conversation with myself. So I didn't do a podcast last week. Got a little caught up with life. But that's alright, because that means today I've got a lot to talk about. We're going to do the strain of the week. We're going to go over a couple of things I put up on social media. I'm going to start a series about the endocannabinoid system, which is the system in our bodies that takes in the cannabinoids inside cannabis. That's a terrible explanation right there. Anyways, we'll get into it deeper. And I've also got a conversation that I recorded at the Shangri-La Care Cooperative, which is another cannabis dispensary up here in beautiful Ojai. But we'll get into that a little later. Right now, let's talk about the strain of the week, which is giving it up to Fire OG. Big fan of the Fire OG. It is a sativa hybrid, which is just a sativa crossed with a sativa, for the most part. I mean, I'm sure there's a little indica in there somewhere because everything's so hybridized, but that's neither here nor there. Alright, let's see. The Fire OG. It's got a nice little lemony smell to it, pretty potent. A little like a fake smell, like a pine sol smell almost. It's like a pine cone that was rolled in wet dirt, but in a good way. It's got that nice earthy, smell to it. And the high is a nice level high. I mean, it's not going to put you in the couch, or at least it doesn't put me in the couch. And it lasts a nice long time. It's the smooth kind of even high once I get there. And it really lets me focus on what I need to get done on work. It really keeps me energized. Not in a speedy kind of way, more of a focused kind of way. So if you see it out there at your local dispensaries, pick some up. It's also really good for pain. Now I want to talk about some seeds that I got. I had ordered some seeds from Irie Genetics, and these are the Space Force. And it is a cross between the Space Bitch and a Rise. I like the packaging because it says Genetic Preservation Kit, sold for souvenir purposes only. Yes, it is a souvenir. If you're not familiar with Irie Genetics, they're out of Colorado. They're put together by a really great guy by the name of Rasta Jeff. And Rasta Jeff has his own podcast called Grow From Your Heart. And that guy is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to growing cannabis and breeding it. If you really want to know the ins and outs, like all the minute details of a lot of stuff, listen to that guy's podcast. So, like I said, got these seeds, real excited. I think I'm going to pop 5 of them today. I got a 10-pack. So I think I'm going to do 5 of them, see what comes up, and grow the hell out of them. And you should follow him on Instagram. He has a lot of great pictures. I believe that's at Irie Genetics. So yeah, excited for that. Also, if you follow me on social media, I had put up a picture. Somebody had given me a tray of these small plants. And they were a total mystery because the people who gave them to me, they didn't know what they were as far as what strain they were. I could tell they were sativa by the long, thin leaves, but other than that, no clue. And they couldn't tell me if they were from seed or clones. I'm assuming they were from seed because half of them were males and the other half were females. They were in pretty bad shape. I wound up keeping 14 out of 14. I wound up keeping 4 out of the 13 that were there. Like I said, half of them were males. The other ones just looked very sickly. I didn't need to take these plants. I just hate seeing an orphan. So I didn't really do a good job at potting them. Since I didn't have any prepared soil, I just grabbed some soil that I had, threw in some amendments like neem meal, kelp meal, just threw in a bunch of stuff and then put them in that dirt, which isn't a good idea because I think I burned them. Usually when I put a soil together, I let it cook for like 3 or 4 weeks, because as the neem meal and the kelp meal are breaking down, that soil, that compost, can get hot temperature-wise. That's why sometimes you'll see compost heaps, like huge industrial compost heaps, smoking. And that's because the nitrogen's breaking down so fast that it's physically creating heat. And you'll see, that's why they also constantly have to turn the compost heaps, because if not, it could catch on fire. So I think I burned them. Only time will tell, but they're looking like signs of burning. Like I said, I didn't need them. They may wind up dying. Mostly because I'm also not babying them, because I don't need them. Anyways, I'm on this whole tangent now about these stupid plants. Long story short, I'll let you know how that goes. I'm glad I'm not into cats like that. Can you imagine if I couldn't see an orphan cat? I'd have cats everywhere. So like I said, I'm going to start a new series about the endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system is a collection of receptors throughout the body that take in cannabinoids, which are molecules in cannabis, that help the human body in a positive way. So for the next few episodes, I'm going to be taking portions and talking about the endocannabinoid system, different ways it affects us, different ways it helps us, and how cannabis fits into that whole puzzle. I am in the process of getting a doctor on the show to help us understand the science of it, because I am in no way a doctor or a lawyer. I'm just a guy with a microphone. And so I'm going to get a doctor in here, and he's going to help distill that information for us so we can understand how it works. If you have a question about the endocannabinoid system that you'd like to ask a doctor, send it to me. You can email me. That's inmygrow@gmail.com. Find me on Instagram @inmygrow. Yeah, don't be shy. Send me those questions, and we'll get them to the doctor, and we'll learn together about this thing. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do about the endocannabinoid system is I'm going to go through the history. Are you ready? Here we go. Okay, so let's understand that word endocannabinoid system. Endo is short for endogenous. It is the endogenous cannabinoid system. Endogenous means having an internal cause or origin. Also means growing or originating from within an organism. So that means the body itself, since we have an endocannabinoid system, the body itself makes its own natural cannabinoids. So a little bit of history. Let's see. Back in 1964, Israeli scientist and cannabis hero Raphael Mechoulam was able to identify and isolate THC for the first time. And a little bit afterwards, he was able to identify CBD. And that was back in 1964, okay? Now, it wasn't until 1988 that the first cannabinoid receptor was found in rats' brains. And this was found by Alan Howlett and William Devane. All right, and those cannabinoid receptors were known as the CB1 receptors. So now, once they identified the receptors, they started to use the synthetic form of the THC, how they isolated back in 64, so they could start mapping the brain to see where these receptors lived in the brain. So once they started to map the brain, they found that the receptors were mostly found in the parts of the brain that were associated with mental and physiological processes, including memory, higher cognition, motor coordination, appetite, emotions, among other things. So now scientists are starting to wonder, okay, if cannabinoids affect so many parts of the brain, the body has to make its own, right? Because to them, it makes no sense for the body to have that system of recognizing cannabinoids if the body isn't making some of its own. But they didn't know this yet. It wasn't until 1990 when Lisa Matsuda announced at the National Academy of Science Institutes of Medicine that her and her team at the National Institute of Mental Health found the DNA sequence that makes the THC-sensitive receptors in rats. All right, so now they know where in our DNA those receptors come from. So now the scientists are going to make what are called knockout mice. I love that word, knockout mice. It's like a name to a rock band, Alex and the Knockout Mice. No. Anyway, so the knockout mice, which means that they grew these mice in the lab that don't have THC receptors. It sounds like some kind of punishment, right? But anyways, that's just a side note about the knockout mice. I just like that story. And then in 1992, the first endocannabinoid was discovered, anandamide, which was the first naturally occurring endogenous cannabinoid, which means it was the first cannabinoid that was discovered that the body makes on its own. It's not taking it in from outside sources, it's making it on its own. Once again, that was found by Raphael Mechoulam and his team, as well as William Devine and Dr. Lemire Hanous. I hope I got your name right, brother. And then in 1993, the second cannabinoid receptor was found as part of the immune and nervous system, and that was called the CB2 receptors. And it was found to mostly be in the gut, the spleen, the liver, the heart, the kidneys, bones, blood vessels, lymph cells, and the reproductive organs. And then in 1995, the second endocannabinoid was found, once again, by Mechoulam and his group. And they called this one 2-arachidanol. You know what? They called it 2-AG for short. I can't even read that scientific name. Google 2-AG and you'll get the scientific name, because that just looks like the alphabet thrown together. Okay, so the second cannabinoid that happens naturally in the body, Mechoulam found, they called it 2-AG. And 2-AG attaches to both the CB1 and the CB2 receptors. So that is a brief history of the endocannabinoid system. And you can tell by the dates that we haven't known about this system for a very long time. All the science and all the research is still really new. And that's more than likely why a lot of patients don't get a lot of information from their doctors. Is because it's still new, the research is still being done. A lot of the research is still being done on different disease systems. So I think it's up to us, the patients, to ask our doctors to inform themselves about it. So don't be afraid to ask your doctor about it. And next time, I'll have another topic about the endocannabinoid system, and we'll just keep educating ourselves about it. So I'm going to take a short break, brothers and sisters. And when I come back, I'm going to play that conversation that I had with Jeffrey Kroll and Aloni from the Shangri-La Care Cooperative, another great dispensary up here in Ojai. I went in there to talk to them about adult use in Ojai because there was some confusion in the last couple of weeks about when that was actually going to take place. It sounded like the city council was trying to make some shady moves, but it got straightened out. Jeffrey was nice enough to have me come into the dispensary and talk about this topic, amongst other things. Like I said, when I come back, I'm going to have that conversation for you. So hang tight, listen to some music, and I will be back.
Still gonna miss you, boy. Still gonna miss you, boy. Still gonna miss you, boy.
Brothers and sisters, welcome back. As promised, I've got a couple of guests with me today. I've got Jeffrey Kroll, who is the director of the Shangri-La Care Cooperative here in Ojai. And I've also got, you have to introduce yourself, Alon.
No worries. Aloni.
And what do you do here?
I'm marketing and I'm a consultant as well. So I help patients and help out with getting the word out.
Well, I want to thank you guys, first of all, for taking the time and talking to me.
You're welcome.
And so A couple of weeks ago, I had Chelsea on, and we were talking about adult use here in Ojai. I pretty much assumed it was already taken care of, and it was going to happen in the next few weeks. Last week, I got an email from Shangri-La saying you guys were going recreational the following Friday, which is the 10th today. And then a couple of days later, there was some kind of town hall meeting, and city council meeting. So what did the city council try to do? What were they trying to do?
Well, basically the rules of getting the ordinance on the books required that once the city council votes, and it was 4-1 in favor of recreational adult access, that goes to another 30 days where you have a second vote and 2 separate readings of the ordinance. Once that is done, and the second vote, which was also 4-1, you must wait 30 days before that ordinance becomes official. It gives anyone in the public world an opportunity to complain or amend the rules or, have some objection. At this point, it was official yesterday on August 9th. And today, the 10th, would have been our first day of recreational adult. Both Chelsea, Sesame Creek, and myself submitted our application today. So it's a very simple application because we've already been vetted for medical and medical delivery. So all of the investigation work about our backgrounds, our finances, our security clearance, our DOJ live scanning has already been complete. So the city on Tuesday, Steve McCleary indicated that it's a relatively simple process to turn in that application and wait for his letter of approval. Once we receive that, was either today at 5:30, or it's going to be on Monday or Tuesday, we then call the state and we modify our state permit to add adult recreational access.
Is that a separate application process?
No, they're just adding because the state program as it's written now is really merging both medical and adult. If you read the actual rules of the road or the 569 pages, it really is addressing the cannabis industry. There's very few distinctions between recreational adult and medical. The age difference is 18 and older for someone with a medical rec, but adult is 21 and older for access. The only other difference for medical is that if they hold the county medical cannabis card, which costs $120, they will then be able to ask us not to charge sales tax. So that they get a break, the medical patients.
Oh, okay. There's a good reason to get your state medical card.
Well, the state medical cost $120, so you have to be a pretty substantial amount of money each and every month to really offset that 7.25. So beside the doctor's recommendation, I went to the county and showed my doctor's recommendation to get the county card.
Yeah, because most of us are walking around with just a doctor's recommendation.
Correct, and that's how the collective and cooperative model has been established. The goal eventually was, of course, to, like some other states, they've issued a state registration card. So not every state does what California does. So if you're in the state of Connecticut, you have to go to the state of Connecticut health department to get your cannabis card.
So you guys are planning on going rec on the 15th?
Or earlier. In other words,
earlier.
As soon as the city gives us our acceptance letter for adult and recreational, we just make a phone call and an email to the state, and they add that to our existing permit profile.
Wow, that sounds really simple considering how
It's real simple with the
complicated
state.
everything else was.
Of course, the complexity is with each of these, it costs money at the state level, and they've rescheduled the payment amount, and hopefully they will prorate what's remaining in this year for what that fee is. Wow. But if you want both, it's about $20,000 at the state for the whole year for both medical and recreational.
Wow, that's not light.
Well, you have to realize that we're starting with a brand new bureaucracy. there's already
I have to laugh at
there's
that.
a lot of complaints about it being too high. The 15% excise tax, the state was considering lowering it to 11% for the next 3 years in order to help get this regulated market a jump start. The other thing is the January 9th deadline in 2019 is when collectives and cooperatives no longer are viable. You must convert to a for-profit C Corp prior to that date.
So they're not going to allow any more collectives to be.
No, all collectives and cooperatives cease to exist on January 9th at 5 o'clock, sunset.
Okay, so last week I went to a dispensary down in Port Hueneme, who they say is
Scout Masters?
yes, and they, Port Hueneme says they're recreational. Went in there, but I was still handed a form, had to sign my life away for whatever reason. That's not how I imagined adult use or rec to be. I thought it was going to be like a bar. You just go and show your ID and they wave you in. What is it going to be like to walk into Shangri-La when you guys are recreational?
You will show your driver's license, and on the back of your driver's license is this QR code, barcode. Mm-hmm. We have the system that's state approved called Indica Online that actually downloads that information as you have posted on the front of your card, your name, your address, your city. Does not include your phone number or your email address. That's voluntarily. If you'd like to give us that, then you get on our mailing list for specials and appreciation, customer appreciations and vendors, and of course the various events that we want to have, whether they be educational about the science of cannabinoids or a vendor type of learning or teaching situation.
So essentially, what will happen is you come in with your ID, you show our security guard your ID, and it should be a seamless. Once they check to make sure that your ID is proper and real, that you should be able to just walk in.
Just walk right in. Oh, fuck! I love that. So now, you had mentioned you guys have classes.
Yeah. So Tuesdays and Wednesdays, actually, Jeff is going to be hosting. They'll be starting towards the end of the month. We'll be going through different topics specifically, so definitely you'll have to join our email list so you'll get that in.
For sure.
And then essentially what our goal is not only to educate, but also introduce products too. And so we're hoping to have some vendors who will also participate. So if it's CBD, we'll have a couple of CBD vendors, these kind of things. But as you were waiting in the waiting room, you'll notice clients come in and they ask a lot of questions. And so this is our opportunity to kind of bring everybody together. Because one of the things that we did notice is that when there's a few people, they all ask the same questions. So this will allow them to ask the same questions all together, but be able to get some more individualized response. Because what we do know is that there isn't enough research that's been done, and that with each person, it slightly is different in how people intake it. So we want to be able to educate everybody on not only the consumption, but what it does as you're consuming and things to look out for, and then the health benefits as well.
Well, plus there's also a lot of new products coming online. Mm-hmm. It's got to be like every month.
Oh, every
So-
week.
It's kind of important to note that we're not doctors,
Right.
but because of our experience of 7+ years, we've learned a lot, and anecdotally we can share that information, how it's affected us. We try to make a customer feel comfortable to share with us what works and what doesn't work. We want them to choose a medicine or a product that they enjoy and make it worthwhile. And that line of communication really has to do with education and feeling comfortable in a family type atmosphere.
One of the things that just makes us different, and we try to promote this as much as possible, is our individual contact. It's not an expectation that you come in and come out. In fact, if you wanted to come in and come out, go somewhere else, because we really want to talk to you about the plant. We want you to learn about the plant so you can use it properly. Because this isn't like it was back in the day where it's, let's just get high. And what we're discovering is so many health properties that, sure, we were getting high back in the days, but those health properties have stuck in. And personally, I think that, especially with the amount of consumption, I mean, I'm 40 plus, and definitely the 90s were my smoking time. But I would definitely say that if it wasn't for all that smoking, our lifespans would be a little less.
Well, I think we'd all look a lot older too.
Yeah, definitely.
There's something also about adult recreational access that's really kind of important. There are a lot of people who just don't want to be in the system, and they haven't been for years. They don't want to get a medical recommendation. And this is an opportunity to make them comfortable to come in under recreational. If they have questions, and it's more involved where we have a one-to-one, we would then ask them to come to the seminar or go set up in a meeting for a 1-hour consultation with either Jeff Hoffman or myself. And the goal here is to try to teach them some of the science and some of our anecdotal stories that we ourselves have gone through personally. And that really hand-holding is what we're about, is the service.
Well, and that's a great idea, because I know a couple of cancer patients who come to me for advice, and I'd like to point them towards the dispensary, but you know, they're really hesitant. They're of an older generation. There's a lot of baggage with just the word marijuana. So yeah, you know, once it goes recreational or adult use, it's going to be a really big deal for them.
Well, also, one of the things that I've noticed in the industry is how little they are being catered to. And the stats show that they're the fastest demographic of users, of new users. And so it's really important for us to really take that time to talk to them, because not only are they getting educated, but they are the fastest growing consumers. And they are a demographic that we want to target because they're using it. They have more time on their hands with retirement, things like that, and they're really concentrated on their health. So they spend more time to ask these questions. And that's why, personally, I love working here, is because I get to take that time. Like I said earlier, if you're just trying to get in and get out, we're probably not the shop for you.
But I also want to point out that by having recreational, we also hope to make an impact on the prescription medications of pain medications, the opioid epidemic.
Yep.
The statistics are showing that in some states there's been a reduction as much as 25%. As we know, cannabis is not a habit-forming medication and doesn't have any of the side effects that you would have with prescription medications. So is there a possible tool to take someone at a pain level of 8 or 9 who are literally addicted to a pill every 4 to 6 hours, and unfortunately they risk health issues and death, because we know that oxycodone mixed with alcohol can shut down your diaphragm. So, you know, I've never met someone so stoned in their life that they did not have a touch with reality.
Sure.
But when I talk about alcohol, or I talk about other prescription medications, that's not the case. There certainly is a break point or crossing the line where they don't have a clue about reality or what they're doing or how they infect themselves and others.
I'll give you
That's not the case with cannabis.
I'll give you a personal story. So one of the reasons why I'm so passionate and why I came in is because I actually lost 2 of my siblings, you know, my entire family from opioid. They were about 5 years apart. And, you know, it was funny because, like, I would talk to my sister and she would just take pills, and they were all prescribed. And, you know, the life of her was gone. You know, there's a spark that everybody has in their voice or those kind of things. It was gone. She talked to me like this all day long. I gotta get you out. I gotta, you know?
Yeah.
I don't want to smoke. My doctor tells me I shouldn't smoke. It'll interrupt the meds and I won't get healthy. And I'm looking at her, well, you just gained 100 pounds. You haven't left your house in 6 months. And, you know, and that's the thing. And so as we're kind of discovering and getting these people off those meds, I had a woman come in. She was on Ambien. And she just needed to get off of Ambien. And I don't know if you know much about Ambien, but it's difficult to come off of.
It is. Ambient's really habit forming, and it's a pretty crazy drug, Ambient.
Yeah.
Because Ambient, turns out, is what do they call it? An anti-inhibitor.
Right.
So it breaks down your inhibitions.
Right.
So, I mean, that's why people on airplanes start taking off their clothes when they're on Ambien. They're like, you know, and for another thing, it's highly addictive. It's not supposed to be taken every night. Yeah, no, Ambient's...
They actually have also developed psychosis from...
Yeah. Well, that's what I was getting to with this woman. She was having hallucinations coming off of it. And what we did was we put her into a tincture that helps her sleep. A week later, she comes in with her daughter, they didn't buy anything. They just wanted to come in and thank me because it was just like night and day. And this is what this plant does. It's the amazing things to see this. It's just
we also feel that we don't instruct our patients to stop taking their prescription medication.
Right.
We instruct them to work with their doctors. Most of the doctors, because of the federal controlled substance stance of being Schedule 1, are afraid of losing their medical license. But if I was a doctor and I prescribed pain medications, I would have sleepless nights worried about my patients who possibly might overdose on the medication I prescribed. I don't have that fear in doing that with cannabis. What happens is it's like magic. They forget to take their pain meds when they start using a cannabis product.
Yeah.
Or they go to sleep and the next morning they wake up refreshed and alive and vibrant and they said, I forgot to take my Ambien pill. So that's kind of the transition stories that we hear. And that's really a statement of how powerful. This is not a medication that has been around just for, since 1996 when the Compassion Act.
Sure.
It's 13,000 years.
Yeah.
We're rediscovering how powerful this medication was. And we've gone through 70 years of brainwashing. And I'm 68 years, so short of 2 years, I was right there.
Yeah, hey, Reagan did a whole number on our heads too, man.
But just say no. Yeah.
Not turning your parents on, no, they'll be all right. It's like, really, Nancy?
Now, pharmaceuticals, I have nothing bad to say about pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals are magic. We're living longer as a population than ever.
Yeah.
But there's a point in which we become so acceptance of just receiving a prescription and a pill.
Yeah.
We are not looking at what possibly caused our health condition in the first place. Beside the genetic disposition that we may have it in our DNA code, but we are not eating whole foods. We're eating processed foods. The incidence of cancer now is 1/3 of our population will have some form of cancer in their lifetime. Now, why is that? We're become a country that people are on such a rush. We go from one fast food restaurant to another.
Yeah,
And we don't cook anymore our own basic raw ingredients.
And if you look at everything that we consume, whether it's medicine, whether it's food, whether it's entertainment, whether it's, all of this, nobody looks to asking the question of what is in this. Look at even culture, like our culture. Like now we're getting all these people to get taken off of these social networks because of what they're saying and stuff. It's because we've lived so long accepting what they're saying. And it's just like the food. We walk into a restaurant, I'm diabetic. So when I became diabetic 10 years ago, it was like a huge shock because all I could do now is read everything in these to know whether there's sugar or not. And that that exponentially changed my health in general. But the culture that we have of not wanting to check it out, that's why people still purchase cannabis on the black market. They don't know about the pesticides or the mold that's potential in there and what that can do to their body. They're just concerned with getting a cheaper price and something more convenient. And this is how culturally, unfortunately, we've kind of become. And I know it's kind of a tangent, but it all kind of comes back around to how we consume and what we consume if we're not questioning it, which is kind of like a natural thing to do, is to question. If we don't question it, we don't learn about it. If we don't learn about it, we get stuck. And then, 70 years later of going to McDonald's, we discover that it's a chemical in one of the foods of a preservative that gets us cancer. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're just not asking the right questions.
And there's a lot of motivation about profit.
Well,
Let's look at EPA. When EPA, we talk about environmental issues, or the FDA, we talk about drugs and trials. We've made medication so expensive now because of those trials, but yet who submits those trials? It's from the drug companies themselves. They're not done by a third party independent. We trust what those drug companies tell us. We find out later, and an example of my case, I had a letter that I got from the Food and Drug Administration that I was exposed to a particular formulation of Lipitor, which is an anti-statin, and that's an anti-cholesterol drug. And they informed me, because I was taking it for 8+ years, that I had to go through a heart stress test because of the fact that they've now discovered years later that it caused heart valve damage. Fortunately, I went to the cardiologist in Santa Barbara, I did the stress test, I did not have that valve damage that they suspected. But they've since reformulated Lipitor. And there is some evidence that a certain number of deaths are acceptable. If it helps 50,000 people, but yet we got 5,000 that die from it, those stats don't necessarily, we don't get privilege to that information.
And remember this, drug companies are like music labels. They're big banks, and they invest in something that could potentially not work, like a record label. I'm going to put $1 million into this artist. There's no guarantee that this artist is going to be number one on the Billboard charts. So what happens is that cost carries over into other drugs. The question really is, how much of that is really a carryover versus a profit? And that's where we're really discovering, when we start to look at places like France, where they have socialized medicine and they buy it such a bulk, there isn't that leeway or leg room from the companies to be able to turn over their loss of profits from other things into those purchases. So like, if you ever wanted to ask yourself why the United States doesn't have a socialized medicine, well, it's because a lot of the manufacturers are based in the United States, and they have to pay for all of the research of the drugs that don't work. It's also why they're so against cannabis. Because if cannabis works, which we're finding that it does, all you got to do is grow it and then produce it so that you can give it out. There's no kind of investment or technology investment aside from making it easier to consume. But as far as the plant is concerned, I mean, a tincture is a 5,000+ year old recipe. The only changes in it has been, plants that we've engineered to have more CBD or less. But that's it. And those are the kind of technologies that are coming into cannabis. So it's definitely, it's sad, but there's a lot of reasons outside of cannabis as to why this isn't the first and foremost therapy for many people.
Well, and I think some of that has to do because of the culture, because as a Western culture, we're used to getting our medicine in a pill form. It's very, we've been doing it for, I don't know, maybe 100 years. Of all of a sudden we have a pill. Hey, take a pill. No, you don't need a plant.
Yep.
But if you go to an Asian pharmacy, you've got two sides.
Yep.
You've got the plant side, and then you've got your pharmaceutical side.
Yep.
First you take your prescription to the plant side, and that pharmacist will say, okay, pulls out a couple herbs, you need to drink this, that, and the other. And
We also have this kind of situation where, in the cannabis area, of literally clinical trials.
Yep.
And because of the Controlled Substance Act being in place right now, clinics, laboratories, and universities just can't get the raw material. When the U.S. Patent Office was founded in 1908, one of the very first patent applications was from a company called Bayer Corporation.
Yep.
And they wanted to patent aspirin. And 3 years later, actually it was 1913, the patent office said, we're not going to let you patent aspirin because it comes from the willow tree. That's Mother Nature. You can't patent Mother Nature. So what did Bayer aspirin do? It refined the process of how to extract it from the willow tree, and they buffered it. And they put talcum powder and watered it down. That's how they got Bayer buffered aspirin. But aspirin has always been made available over the counter since the early 1920s because it could never be controlled and privatized by a pharmaceutical.
And that's just one example of so many that continue to take place. And it's why, you can go about the racism that stopped cannabis from being legalized, definitely when the white kids started smoking it. My God, the devil weed. But there's also, as we got, older and as we started accepting, the 60s were definitely a huge rush when it came to cannabis. The 70s, definitely, when the indica plant started coming to North America and we started getting bigger yields. these were things that were starting to open up people's minds to cannabis, to where this propaganda of the devil weed wasn't there. And so while we can definitely point out that culturally, the racism definitely was the start, it didn't have to continue. I mean, there was that 72, it was under Nixon.
Nixon in 72.
Yeah, so there was
he started the Controlled Substance Act.
But there was a report. Basically, he asked, like, is cannabis, harmful? And they had that whole report by that doctor who put it out, and it was published, and it showed that cannabis had no problems. But what did Nixon do? He didn't listen to his person. He listened to the money.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think LaGuardia put out a report also. He wanted to study what the effects were of cannabis in New York City. And he sent out a bunch of undercover detectives, and they went around to all these jazz clubs and everywhere else, and they're like, look, it's really not affecting the town.
If you have to ask yourself, if cannabis was not effective, why did it expand to 31 states right now? Is it because everyone with 1970 hippies want it? No. It's because the senior population in my age group are finding it works.
Yep.
So the word of mouth from family members, from friends, and whether it be the THC was helpful or the CBD was part of the formula of helping. Now we're doing a decriminalization where now we have 9 states. Coming in November, we will be over the tipping point of 50%, not only medical but recreational will be approved. And our U.S. Constitution requires the reclassification. We think, and I have Schumer's bill right here, this will be the bill that removes the word cannabis and marijuana from the Controlled Substance Act. So it's not possibly going to be reclassified, it's going to be removed because it was never supposed to be on the list of addictive medications and drugs that was formed in 1937.
Now, you were waiting for a moment before you got to us earlier, and I had this couple in. This man asked me 3 times whether cannabis is addictive. Now, I'm saying this because it just shows where we are as far as education and why it's so important to continue really with the push. Because, yes, the 55 and older community are the fastest growing demographic to be entered into the cannabis industry. But listening, like, addictive, should I worry about how much pot can I have? Yes, they're elementary questions for those of us who've been into it. But you can only imagine the distance between those that know and those that don't know, and then those who are, have enough confidence in asking questions. Because that's another cultural thing. Sorry, I'm really on the culture side, but we have developed a culture, especially in the social media age, where it's not hip to not know. And so people claim that they know everything when they're not schooled on any of it. And that's definitely with the younger generation when it comes to cannabis. Because these kids aren't coming in to ask us about the CBD properties and things like that. They're coming in to get high. And look, we'll sell it to them and we'll show them a different, strain to get them a little higher. I usually suggest a little bubble hash and stuff. But they're not interested in their health anyway. It's definitely the vegans and stuff like that ask the questions, but generally these aren't people who are really like trying to get in. But the senior population, like I was saying before, they have the time, they definitely have the resources, and this is why we take our time to really answer the questions and really get.
We had a gentleman come in today, his name is Mark. I've known Mark for probably about 15 years. He is a gardener and he has arthritis problems. And he started with his doctor being issued pain medications. And after a while, he got addicted to them. Of course, he wanted to continue his prescription, but lately, because of the oxycodone and the death associated with opioids, doctors have been restricting and pulling back the quantity of prescriptions that they are issuing because the authorities are now going after these pill pushers who overprescribe.
As they should.
Yep.
Yeah. So he came in here because the doctor basically is cutting him off. Well, if you're addicted to a pain medication and you've been on it for 6-7 years, it's not easy to cut off. cannabis is a good stepping stone to help with the withdrawals from that prescription medication. And hopefully, if your body can acclimate to it and you use the right cannabis and properties, you will start forgetting about your pain medications and start using something that's not addictive and doesn't have the body problems that withdrawals do.
Yeah, and what they're discovering with opioids is that if you combine your opioid use as far as for pain management or with the level of cannabis, it takes less opioids to get you to that effective level.
Absolutely.
So therefore, you don't get you don't get the constipation as badly, and it's less
And your
likely,
body's not dependent on it.
and it's less likely, right? Exactly, that you're going to become addicted to it,
Right.
at least heavily. I mean, I'm sure there's still some people who get addicted to it either way.
Right.
Well, again, what we're finding with cannabis addiction is that it's more cultural and personal than it is physical. So it's the psychological aspect of, well, the last 3 months I've been waking and baking, so it's going to be difficult because of the psychological. But we're not finding any physical, at least within the studies that have taken place. We're not finding a physical addiction or a physical dependency on cannabis. It's more of a psychological dependency.
We sold him a chocolate bar in order to help him, and his response to me was, "What? I have to eat chocolate and I'll be okay?" I said, "Yeah. Do you like chocolate?" He says, "I love chocolate." I said, "Well, use it sparingly. I want you to use it as a tool. So I want you just to take one little piece today and then report back to me tomorrow how you felt, how it worked.
Well, and
The following day, take 2 pieces." But it's kind of like they're amazed that they could take something like an edible or take something like an oil or vaporizing or doing something different than what their mindset is about pills.
Yeah, and it also goes back to the education part, because as far as edibles, they affect us differently than actual smoked cannabis. We have to make sure that, when I communicated with people, I was like, look, you got to start slow and low with the edibles because there is no off switch. Once you start the ride,
Yep.
there's no getting off in the middle.
Right.
So,
Well, let me
if
correct
you
that. There is an off switch.
Beta
And we have
carotene.
2 of them in our cases. And one is called Canna Relief, and it is an antidote to THC high. So I have 2 products that you can
Is
take.
it a heavy CBD or is it a beta carotene? What's in
It's
it?
a little of both.
Okay.
All right, but
All right.
it's B12, B16, B vitamin. It's like a vitamin drink.
Oh, okay.
But because CBDs counteract the THC, it's a lifesaver if someone has this little bottle of 5 ounces of a liquid and they take a little bit too much of an edible. They take 1/5 of this, and within 2 to 5 minutes, they're not high anymore. This is the second one. It's called citrulline. This is the natural occurring medication that our body naturally produces in our brain. If you do not want to have THC cross the blood-brain barrier, take 1 to 2 tablets of this 1 hour before you consume a cannabis product, and you can't absorb THC. Doesn't
So it
cross
just
the
blocks the receptor and it won't let it.
won't let it cross the blood-brain barrier. Let me explain this tool. I'll explain to your listeners that you're looking at a tonometer. This is the device that's used with ophthalmologists and eye doctors.
Yeah, it has a
It's a
little
way
chin
of
rest.
recording
Yeah.
their ocular pressure.
Right.
So
Okay.
we know that cannabis helps with glaucoma.
Right.
So what we do is we ask people, if they're not using cannabis, we take their baseline pressure. Then we recommend and handhold them using cannabis products, and we retest their pressure. That now we're going to know if we're on the right road of reducing their ocular pressure just by what the machine says. This is something you can't judge on your own because you can't feel that ocular pressure. We found that 1/3 of the people who come to us who are using cannabis for glaucoma are using the wrong cannabinoids and strain. It increases the ocular pressure, and that is a major eye-opener for them. So when we first started back in 2009, we were paying optometrists $25 per patient per visit to test.
So then
And
what?
I would test 8 to 9 times so that we would determine which of the products were effective to lower their glaucoma ocular pressure.
So is that specific per patient, or is there just some strains that are better for ocular
Some are
pressure than
better,
others?
some are, it has to do with your absorption. Everybody's body chemistry is a little different.
And that's why Jeff,
coaching.
the two Jeffs, they do the coaching, and you know it's one-on-one. It does all these tests, you know, and we walk you through to monitor and not only you know, recommend, but also see your how you're
Doctor.
responding and everything.
It educates the doctor.
Yep.
So that's why we encourage them to talk to their doctor about cannabis and the absorption.
So these classes, are they going to be free to the public?
So
They gotta
there's
sign up?
the Tuesdays and Wednesdays between 6 and 7 o'clock. Those are more group settings. Then we have our individual counseling, and that you would have to call up and make an appointment, and you know it's a
Schedule.
Yeah, and so the group ones are free. The one-on-ones are definitely going to cost, and so we encourage you to come to these Tuesdays and Wednesdays workshops, we call them. And again, each workshop is of a different topic, so we go kind of granular with each of the topics. Hopefully, depending upon which topic, we'll have a vendor in to kind of also show some of the product. But yeah, we like to consider those as like a great start to where then you can get to the two Jeffs, as I like to call them, and be a little bit smarter as far as your questions and what you're monitoring, so that this way it's a full scope and a full circle.
Yeah, no, I like those classes because it really does give the people who come in to those types of classes, some confidence. So when they actually do go into dispensary, they're not asking some basic
Let
questions.
me tell you,
They
I've
know what
had
they-
people
they know
who've
what they
spent
want.
thousands of dollars on medicines that did not work for them. And they keep searching for something that will. They're desperate. But the goal here is to teach them some of the basic science about the plant so that they can go to any dispensary in California and be knowledgeable about what they're selecting.
And since we're talking about the store and plugging some of the things, I'll go and plug some dates that you're.
Yeah, what do you guys
that
got
you're-
coming up?
So on the 13th, we've got heavy hitters coming in to do a patient appreciation day at 4 o'clock. So that's a great way to save some money. We're doing buy 2 cartridges, get one for $1. Buy 1 cartridge, get a free vape battery. And then and we say come on in and just chat with us. But the next one on the 25th is really our kind of celebration of recreational. And so we definitely encourage everybody to come. We'll have a taco truck. We've got over 10 vendors coming in, so I can't just list all the deals. But we want your listeners to come down during that so that they can just see the vibe and talk to us individually. We might not have the amount of time. You know, I'll be in a T-Rex costume. But, you know...
I'm going to come in just for that.
Hey, maybe we'll put you in the costume and I can handle patients. But we definitely want people to feel the vibe because, again, we don't want you in and out. This isn't an Apple store. We're not looking at everything. We're not looking at profit when you walk in. We're looking at trying to help you. And that's really the beauty of this
We're
job.
basically about service.
Yep.
The service to humanity and the compassion of helping others. Profit comes second to that. It comes, I can't tell you the number of people who've supported Shangri-La through its tough times, through its challenges that it's been through its good times and bad times. It's amazing the number of people that really are marching the march with us. It's just not just us. It's the membership of many collectives and cooperatives and advocates in this industry that want to develop some type of common sense. We are more and more interested in organic foods now than we've ever been. We're more interested about pesticides. We happen to live in a valley that has over 100-year rich history of health, wellness, and spiritualism. There are very few places on this planet that have that kind of mindset and compassion that the Ojai Valley has.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you guys for being the cannabis warriors that you are. And again, I want to thank you for your time. Why don't you tell people where to find Shangri-La?
Sure. We're at 408 Bryant Circle, Suite G. And we're the second driveway, so don't get us mixed up with Sespe, although Sespe's a great shop. We definitely don't want to, but
We're in the
second.
back.
Yeah, we're in the back.
Plenty of parking.
And then just another reminder, the 13th, we have heavy hitters coming in. And then the 25th is our big gala. And we insist on everybody coming.
They got tacos coming in.
And we'll also be loading up our calendar that will say what these topics are on Tuesday, Wednesday. And hopefully we will have a 90-day forward calendar to help customers and patients plan their strategy about education with us.
Alon, so social media wise, how do they find it?
So you would, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Instagram, we're SLCC_Ojai. When it comes to Facebook, it's Facebook / SLCC or Shangri-La Care Cooperative. There is also Twitter, which is same, Shangri-La SLCC Ojai. And you can email us at info@slcc.info. Bat signal is kind of old school, so...
He did all that without a script, folks.
I've been doing this for a while.
And our phone number, by the way, is 805-640-6464.
Well, all right. Well, thanks again, gentlemen. And folks, I'll be right back. So that was an awesome conversation I had with those guys over there at Shangri-La. Great bunch of people over there. Yeah, you can tell Jeffrey's real passionate about cannabis because a couple of times throughout the interview he's just pounding on his desk. He's a great guy. If you're able to go down there, check him out. We're up here in Ojai. I'm going to try and go to as many of those classes as I can, to help educate myself and maybe give a little summary about what was talked about. I haven't really figured out how I'm going to do that. But if you're nearby, don't wait on me. Go down there and check them out yourself so you can educate yourself and other people. Oh, brothers and sisters, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you again for showing up. Thank you again to Jeffrey and Alon for talking to me. So don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to it. We're on Stitcher. We're on CastBox. You can go to the website, inmygrow.com, subscribe from there. We are not on iTunes, mostly because I had trouble early on setting it up and I haven't been back there to try to relaunch it on iTunes. But wherever you're listening to it, go ahead and subscribe. Also, don't forget, if this show has educated you or entertained you at all, and you're able to support it financially, go to patreon.com, find the In My Grow Show, and throw a couple bucks our way. That money, those accounts, it goes to helping me pay for hosting fees, helping me buy equipment, helping me make some videos. All around, it just helps the show out. If you don't want to go to Patreon, if you don't want to help the show out that way, you can go to inmygrow.com. You can buy a t-shirt. T-shirt says, Cannabis Saves Lives. You can go over there and help the show out that way. And get a nice looking t-shirt at the same time. If you don't have the cash to help out, or to buy a t-shirt, that's okay also. Here's how you can help out the show. Just have 3 other people subscribe to the show. That's it. Real easy. Tell 3 other people about it. Alright, mi gente. Like I said, that's all I got. I'm going to get out of here. And remember to always grow, learn, and teach.